locations where I'll be talking and showing you pictures and visuals from tonight. So how do we collect a lot of this information that I'm presenting to you, right? As I said, from visiting the field locations, but also by interviewing over the last 3 weeks, 72 people from different sectors, from the multilaterals like USAID, from the government at the national level here in Hargeisa, but also at the local level in the Sinag region, from businesses. I've been speaking with CEOs of businesses based here in Somaliland and also abroad, but most importantly, the landowners, the people who actually control what's happening to the frankincense. And in addition to the landowners, the communities, and the chiefs and the elders, whom without, there will be no change. So here we are running a focus group. This is Ahmed Didi, and we traveled the region for 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks doing just this. We met with chief elders and CEOs of businesses to get diverse opinions on what the state of the frankincense market is and also the trees. 6 years ago, when I did a supply chain analysis for Somaliland, this is what I came up with. You had Somali landowners who were moving resins to Somali sorting houses where women were sorting, and then Somali middlemen were moving a lot of the resins to Arab wholesalers. And those Arab wholesalers were then exporting to the EU, to the United States and China, where it was turned into value-added products such as oils, and the final consumers across those countries as well. US, China, and the EU being some of the largest consumers of secondary manufacturing of resins into oils. Well, here we are now in 2016. We have a very different situation. The supply chain has modified and changed drastically in a short period of time. We have Somali landowners who move their product sometimes through Somali middlemen, many of whom are employed by the exporters now instead of being independent. The Somali sorting houses, which used to be predominantly in Aragavo, have now shifted to Burao. A process which I'll talk more about as I go on, the separation of bark from the resins being exported to Ethiopia, and that the major resin buyers and exporters moving the resin through Berbera. There's a distillery now in Hargeisa that was not here 6 years ago. But these major exporters, instead of selling the resins directly to the Middle East, are now exporting to their own distilleries abroad. And these distilleries are in the United Arab Emirates, in the European Union, in the UK, in the United States, and in China. The amount of exporters and distillers has grown. There are much more competition in the supply chain than there was 6 years ago, and also there's many more people who are demanding and want to buy these oils. I'd like to pass a bottle of oil around, actually. If we can pass that around, people can see that. Okay, next slide. So here's the resin, and I'm sure most of you have seen it before. But what's changed so much in that supply chain is that this used to be the primary export to the Middle East. And now the oils that we're passing around is what's really demanded in the marketplace. Yeah? Next slide. This is a sorting station, a warehouse in Aragavo. This is owned by Samgum. And they had some very beautiful resin stored there. Next slide. So I started to do an economic analysis of the changes in the supply chain to see what impacts this is having on the region. In 2010, as you can see from the slide here, 1 kilo of resin, of raw resin, was being bought from landowners and harvesters for about $1 US dollar. Landowners at that time were underbidding each other. They were fighting amongst themselves to get their product sold. So I'd say 90 cents, you'd say 80 cents, and the exporter then would be in a very good position because we are underbidding each other to sell the product because the demand was not there yet. Well, mainly exporters of resin to the Middle Eastern market. And what's changed? What's changed now? In 2016, I'm coming back into the same areas. A kilo of resin is on average selling for $6 US. The major exporters are now competing with each other. Instead of landowners and harvesters underbidding each other to move product, now we have major exporters competing for a limited supply. There's only so much resin that can be harvested every year or every season. There's a high demand now, a much higher demand on the international market. Instead of exporting to the Middle East as incense, it's exported mainly for distillation into oils, which hopefully everyone will get a chance to experience. The last analysis, impartial, that was done was by the FAO in 1991. And at that time, they estimated about 1,200 metric tons per year of Carteri resins and about 900 tons of Feriana resins that were being produced and exported. I'm still analyzing these numbers. I'm using shipping records. I'm going to the ministries to try to pull numbers. It's very hard to get at this number. There's a lot of reasons why, so maybe we can talk about that in discussion of why it's hard to come up with the exact numbers of how much resin is being exported, but it's still unclear. So I'm operating from these 1991 figures. I've confirmed this with many of the exporters. They tell me that we're still looking at about the same numbers. So why does that matter? Well, in 2010, if you remember my figure on the last slide, with $1 a kilo at the 1,200 and 900 tons, that was only representing about $210,000 going into the country, right? Being distributed to landowners and harvesters to buy their product. In 2016, at $6 a kilo, it represents $1.26 million being paid to landowners and harvesters to buy their resins. Now, if you remember, I just told you that the resins are not what's the most value. It's the oils. 1 kilo of resin at $6, when distilled, yields $80 for a 1 ounce bottle, which is going around. That bottle that's passing around costs $80 US. If I look at just one distillery that I know about, I have to keep it confidential, but that one distiller grossed $2 million last year from the sale of these oils. So you can see that we have a major disproportionality. We have major disproportion in gains between primary extractors of resins and secondary manufacturers. This is not a new story for Africa or anywhere across the South, but it's happening here in your country as well. So what does all this economics have and the supply chain? What are the impacts on the environment? Yeah? And in my estimation, from all the reports I've read, this is the least understood aspect of what's happening. I think there's pretty good understanding of the market, there's pretty good understanding of the supply chain and the value of the product. I know there's businessmen here in the room who can talk more about this. It's pretty well understood. What's not very well understood is what are the environmental impacts of this supply chain that I just laid out for you. So we were lucky enough to spend time here in the Almado, one of the most beautiful places I have ever seen in the entire world. I'd like to spend more time there. And when we got there to Magdar Mogli, we started assessing the trees And it was very, very sad because the change in 6 years in the health of the trees is drastic. If you can see this picture clearly, this is a tree, this is a frankincense tree that has had its bark stripped off pretty much from as high up as you can reach all the way to the bottom. This is a new practice. I did not see this practice 6 years ago in any of the locations that I visited. I had not seen this before. So this is new. This is a direct impact due to the increase in demand and price. And it drastically weakens the tree health. This tree will die. There's no question that this tree will be dead shortly. Yeah? So by cutting the bark, removing the cambium, and removing these layers of the tree's skin, right? Just like you and me, if we take off our skin, we become more susceptible to disease. Yeah? So what's happening here is these trees are now extremely susceptible to a pest called Myrrh, and ultimately mortality and death. Well, what does this mean? This means an overall decrease in resin output. So if the trees are being stripped like this, they can only produce resin for a few years, if we're lucky. That's me looking very sad at finding dead stripped trees. You can see this tree was completely stripped. This is in Kaab and is now dead. So we kept looking, and this area in Magdar-Mogli, again, in a World Heritage Site, should be a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This should be a national park in the middle of one of the most biodiverse and beautiful ecosystems that I have ever seen. The frankincense trees are dying en masse. We stood in the center, and we did a radius check and counted how many dead trees we could see. And we were astounded by how many trees were dead and dying. If they weren't completely dead yet, they were very sick and unhealthy. Next slide. So the other practice that I witnessed is overcutting. Now, when I was here 6 years ago, there were problems with overcutting. There were, but nothing like I'm seeing now. It has drastically accelerated. Again, the price has gone up so high. So the desire to overcut and to remove resins as quickly as possible is present in the supply chain and in the economics that caused this to happen. So here's a tree, and everywhere you see a red spot here is a cut or a wound. This tree alone had over 60 cuts. It's about, I think this was the tree we estimated to be about 50 years old. A tree of this size and of this age, traditionally, long before 6 years ago, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago, traditional practices would have limited this to 8 to 12 wounds, period. No more. No more. So again, this process, this practice, is weakening the tree health. It leaves the tree susceptible to Myrrh and higher mortality rates. Again, decreasing the overall resin output, both quality and quantity. When a tree is sick like this, when it's overwounded, or if it's been have its bark stripped off, the quality of resins, it just makes sense that the quality of the resins would decrease, that the chemical complexity that the tree is able to manufacture would drop. Next slide. This was a tree that had been so overwounded we couldn't even count the wounds. It was too difficult because there was so much wounding that had happened to this tree that it was in the process of dying, and it was still exuding the milk of the boswellia tree, but it was on its way out. The other phenomena that I saw this time, which I didn't see before, was overtapping of non-mature trees. So if you look at this tree, you see how green it is. Yeah? It's too young. It's too young. to be harvested. It's too young to be cut like this. Again, traditional practices and traditional knowledge set an age of around 40 for mature trees before being tapped. This tree right here is probably about 12. So even the trees that are not ready are being tapped. This is one of the research locations we were on, and we were witnessing young trees. This had not been tapped yet, but this was what we were finding because all of the adult trees were dead. That lines up with studies that have been done in Ethiopia that show high mortality rates, high death rates of adult trees, with young trees propagating and growing, but not having trees that are tappable because of their age. When I was here 6 years ago, I tagged this tree location from this cave and from the edge of the cliff, which is just about 10 feet behind Ahmed here. So here's the tree now. It's completely dead. And this is a Feriana tree, Boswellia feriana. And this gentleman is landowner and harvester, and he's telling me that the trees are dying like this every year.
waxaad ka warartaa dhirtan sida u dhimanaysa iyo goorta geedkan iyo xaaladiisa
dhirtan waxay u dhimanaysaa caafimaad darro iyo ka shaqaynta lafteeda.
Actually, there's two major causes death to this tree. One is unsustainable harvesting.
Yep.
The second is, hare.
Yeah.
waxay kaloo u baahan tahay dhirtii waan laga nasanayn.
They harvest the whole year
waa la
round.
gurin jiray.
They harvest continually the whole year. The 12 months of the year. They cut and harvest.
Yeah.
Again and again. And finally, at the end of the time, this is the result of harvesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, there we have it. That's in 6 years that happened. And when I was here last time, they told me in 10 years they felt like their entire frankincense ecosystem would be in peril. Yeah. Well, there it is. It's not what I was hoping to find. Yep.
waxa dhinta maaha geedkan oo keliya aad bay fara badan yihiin dhirta.
Stephen, you want to go over there to give scale? You want to just stand down there at the end? Stay right there, Amadou. We're going to give scale. Just stay there for a second. This tree was at least 60 years old when I was here, so this kind of corroborates that the adult trees are the ones that are dying out the fast. Everywhere we're going, we're seeing the trees 40 years and over are the ones dying. And here, I'm not really seeing any babies, though. Okay. Okay, next slide. Oh, it's off now. Oh, okay. So as mentioned in the video clip there, the process of continuous harvesting is also another very big change from 6 years ago. Traditionally, 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, the traditional method was to tap a tree for 2 years and to let that tree rest for 1 year in between. When I was here 6 years ago, that really wasn't happening very much still, but the continuous harvesting that we're seeing now is a new phenomena. That's new. Reports are, especially on the carteri trees, or mainly on the carteri trees, is that they're subjected to 2 rounds of harvesting per year. So as the formal harvest, the legitimate harvesting season that's ending right now, harvesters will go back out, make new cuts, and harvest again. As it rains, the trees will get no rest at all. Again, this weakens tree health and leaves these trees susceptible to pests and higher mortality and decreases overall resin quality and quantity. We tried to set up a study plot here, and we couldn't because all of the adult trees were dead. There were lots of babies growing, which was giving me some hope, but you can see how changed or how desolate this landscape has become. This is more now to the southwest of the escarpment, the geologic feature of which frankincense trees grow on. But it's this is a devastated and degraded landscape. Probably also due to charcoal production. So what are the social impacts of the environmental impacts? Because we depend on the environment, all of us, for everything. Our whole lives come from our subsistence comes from the planet. So it always has social impacts when the environment is degraded. Well, in this case, we have resource conflict leading to community destabilization and ultimately violence. I was seeing it in every community that I went into, that there's a real conflict between family members, clan to clan, buyer to buyer, exporter to exporter. We have a big competition going now to get at these resins because they're very valuable on the world market. But that's destabilizing these communities. Ecologically, it's destabilizing these communities because when you damage ecosystems and degrade land to this extent, you lose other services. You lose water, you lose biodiversity, you lose wildlife. Has very big social impacts. A crash in the supply leading to increased poverty is coming. Right now, what you're experiencing in the market is what we call a peak, where the resin quantity and quality is slowly starting to decrease, but the price is still high. So landowners aren't quite feeling the hurt yet, but it's peaking. And what happens with peaks is the longer you stay on the top of the peak, the harder the crash is economically and ecologically on the other side. The social impacts of this are displacement and having environmental refugees. We spoke with several people who were conveying to us that they will just have to move somewhere else because they have no other source of livelihood. This is it. This is what they have. And if the trees are gone, they will not be able to stay in some of these communities and they will have to move. And quite possibly, they will move to other places that still have good trees, and the same cycle will start again. If they cannot locate other places where there are trees, they will have to move into the cities. And so this is a process we call now environmental refugees. Internally displaced people, not because of war, but because of environmental collapse. And we're seeing this all across different parts of the world. This is very real. The other thing, the other social impact, which was everywhere we went, was increasing khat addiction, and also noted that illegal harvesters, mainly youth, going behind the legitimate landowners and illegally harvesting trees to get money to buy khat. So the khat is having a major impact on the natural resources. The combination of the degradation of the environmental condition along with increasing khat addiction exacerbates what we call a poverty trap and keeps people in poverty. There's a loss of cultural heritage and a sense of place. The frankincense trade is as old as the pharaohs. It has existed for thousands of years. The species of boswellia trees that grow in Somaliland are some of the highest quality and best trees anywhere in the growing region across the Middle East and other parts of the Horn of Africa. It is absolutely your national treasure, these forests, and they are rare and unique. We met a lot of people who were feeling depressed and hopeless and angry at a lot of things. At the national government for not doing anything, at each other for being for families not managing the trees well, with the buyers and exporters for not investing in the communities. There was a lot of high emotion, a lot, more than I have ever seen in this country around a resource issue, and as high as some of the emotions that I've seen in combat zones where I work in other countries around blood diamonds in Sierra Leone, the emotion levels were that high. And I predict they will only get higher. There's a lack of trust and a growing animosity towards companies, government, multilaterals, NGOs. They vetted me thoroughly to make sure that I was none of these things, that I was an impartial researcher. And so I should tell you that my funding comes from 4 different sources, not only this one company, but by third-party verifiers in the EU who want to know if the oils they are buying are coming from sustainably harvested trees. I can't tell them yes now. I have to go home and tell them no. And that has a very big impact on the market overall, but we're not going to give up there. We're going to look for solutions. Also, increasing population pressures and encroachment was leading to family feuds. So we were seeing many more family feuds, and that disruption in who manages the land within a family was really leading to degradation of the land and overuse, because there weren't coordinated efforts amongst family members. When it's my year to profit and it's your year next year, we don't necessarily have the same management practices, and so that starts even more fighting. The families that have coordinated and agreed to method for harvesting that's more sustainable are in the minority, and they're struggling. They're there. There's people who are trying to do this right. There are people who are really trying to do this properly, but they're struggling. Is that another little video? Okay. So I've just asked him what he'll do if the trees in this area continue dying.
haddii dhirtu ay dhimashadan sii socoto maxaad umalaysaa xaaladdu ay noqonaysaa xaaladdu waxay noqonaysaa dhulka baabaa isxaar noqonaya kadibna adiguna waad ka guuraysaa actually he said if this diets continue just the environment become very harsh and severe then with my family will abandon, will move from here to the towns.
And so they'll become internally displaced people due to environmental collapse. When the frankincense trees die, does it affect the rest of the forest?
I think it depends on each other, this plant community. It depends,
on each other.
On each other. When this die, the other may come.
Right.
Also die.
So we don't really know. We don't really know the impact of losing these trees on the forest because it's the first time they're dying so rapidly.
Wali maynaan arag. Wali ma ogin cawaaqibku wuxuu noqon doono marka kan baynu aragnaa dhibashadiisa. Cawaaqibka dambe waxa uu noqon doono. Wali ma ogin laakiin kullu waxa loo baahan yahay laga taxadiro.
Yeah. Yeah.
I explained, we don't know the impact, what will be the impact. We know this one, and the other plants died. I think we'll see the result of that,
Right. So we don't know yet because it's happening very rapidly, and it's the first time in his lifetime to have the trees die off like this due to overharvesting and pests. I'm very sorry. This is a situation analysis that I put together showing the complexities of the interactions that are exacerbating this problem. I'll just briefly touch on this part because I really want to get to discussion with all of you and hear from you and answer questions. But let's not forget climate change and the impacts of the shifting of the rains and drought and the impact that's having and stressing the ecosystems. Well, there's always hope. And a lot of the hope that I saw is that these are extremely resilient trees. They grow in such a harsh spot. They occupy micro niches, we call them, in volcanic rock where small amounts of soil collect and a little bit of water, and they propagate. And they can also be propagated by clipping them and replanting them. So they have two mechanisms for growing: cutting from clipping and repropagating, and also from seed. The presence of baby trees in many of the locations that I went to signify that these forests can regenerate if they are well managed. If we act now, if something is done, these forests can regenerate. Of course, there still will be or might be a market glut where there will not be enough trees of mature age to tap. But there's hope. And so I want to leave you with a couple solutions. Next slide. I don't like to just talk, and I don't like to just do research. I actually like to get things done. And so part of what I'm doing now back here in the Capitol is pushing very hard as many people in authority positions and funders that I can to implement some of these solutions and to act. And one of the first ones is to create a council of frankincense producing communities. That's the elders, the chiefs, to get them all together to work on this problem. The second one is to establish a frankincense exporters association and build a business code of conduct for harvesting that would not allow stripping, overwounding, allowing the trees to rest, and providing investment incentives for landowners to comply. There needs to be at the same time a national ban and government enforcement on overharvesting. It can't just be the private companies or the landowners and chiefs. It has to be the government too. So we need a public-private partnership to deal with this. And that's partly would be enforced by a forest protection unit that, as I understand, existed in this country at one time. We need to support ongoing ecological monitoring of the growing region by independent evaluators like myself and the team that I work with. I could not do this by myself. And establish community-based forest protection and education initiatives. So there's my contact information for anyone who wants to contact me for further discussion, and I think we'll move into questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Anjanette. Actually, I mean, it's very distressing and very painful reports what's happening in the field, really, yeah. It's sad to see, I mean, tree stands that has been thriving for thousands of years, as he has mentioned it, is dying fast. It's our heritage dying too. So I know your study is focused on frankincense, but equally, you know, Myrrh, Malmal, is also priced higher now than the ordinary frankincense. First of all, do you think it's also going through the same fate or not? That's one question. The other question is that, you know, you just lastly talked about regeneration. That's where the hope is. But also, I mean, I don't know, before the collapse of the previous government, there was some attempts to domesticate frankincense. Already, you know, some other species are being domesticated, like the Cordoxia edulis, we call it yi'ib, the henna. So, given, you know, the spatial ecological niche that the frankincense thrives in, what are the challenges in domesticating frankincense? That's another question. A third question will be that, you know, most of this deparking of fruit is going, you know, the park goes to Ethiopia. Yeah. It's used widely in Ethiopia. I think that could be, it's a suggestion, that could be, you know, the authorities can stop, you know, exportation of that park. It can reduce, you know. So, and another question is that, you know, I mean, is that too much?
forget any of them.
Okay. Okay.
So the first one about Myrrh, we intended to also do evaluation of the Myrrh trees. That will be on the next trip. They grow in a different area, across a wider zone, and so it's unclear actually right now. I can't confirm or deny that the Myrrh trees are in peril because we did not get to evaluation of them, but we plan to. It is definitely true that the demand for Myrrh products and Myrrh oils is increasing in the international market. All of these products now have new markets. The oils that's going around is some of the compounds in it are FDA in the United States, federally recognized and certified to treat arthritis for anti-inflammatory properties, used in anti-aging creams, and there are 6 trials currently going on in China and the United States for the ability of these oils and compounds in these oils to kill cancer cells. So this creates a very different market demand. Myrrh also has many medical applications. You can buy toothpaste made out of myrrh in the United States. It's very healing to the digestive tract. So it's under scientific study. All 3 are under scientific study for new uses. So we will be back to look more closely at the myrrh trees. Domestication is a very important question. We saw in Goodmo a small nursery that an elder had set up about 40 years ago where he planted just a few trees to experiment with them. They were doing quite well, actually. They were being watered and protected, and they were doing quite well. We saw another plot of land where his son had tried domesticating them and had successfully done that, but there has not been any academic institution that has taken on creating a nursery. We're proposing to do that at Senag University in Aragavo to build capacity and research at the university, but it's the closest, it makes the most sense to experiment with propagation and domestication at that site in Aragavo. One of the challenges is that landowners become very nervous when you take clippings or seeds from the forest because they are afraid that they will be brought to Djibouti or to other countries and planted, and that Somaliland will lose its genetic rights, its genetic property, and that the trade will shift. There's already a lot of rumors that trees have been taken out of here and planted, again, in Djibouti, in Oman, in Yemen. And so the only way we could prove that is by genetic testing of the trees and looking at the genetics of trees in other countries. But so the domestication is extremely important, and we plan to set up a study site at University of Senag, and so I encourage students to get involved in that with us.
Thank you so much. I will not be asking more questions because, I hope more questions will be coming from the audience.
The frankincense is sold. Too much income are coming to Somaliland. So when income are coming to Somaliland, jobs are created, things economically improved. Then, when you look at the China and you look at the Japan, they compete in according to economics. So we want, like Somaliland, we want to be like China and Japan, to have more income, to compete, to have economical power, later on a future power, then member of the Security Council, instead of thinking about the ecology. Okay, my question to you is that when 1 kilo or 1 ton of frankincense is actually sold from here, like $6, it don't tell us how much it costs in US. So later on, those farmers, we can say if they cost $30, we can go back and say, okay, you need to reconsider the price, and increase it, because the international market doesn't sell in this way. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm definitely not suggesting that you stop tapping trees. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that the unsustainable tapping will crash the supply chain. It will move to Oman, it will move to other, they're already doing that. When Somaliland can't meet demand, buyers go to Oman. So, do you want this industry to last 10 years or 100 years? Do you want to leave it to the next generation? Is more the question. So I'm not advocating for stopping at all. What I am is to move towards secondary manufacturing so that more profits do stay in Somaliland, that the government revenues collected on the secondary manufacturing are better for the national budget. And absolutely, there's also many other types of trees, gums, and resins that come from Somaliland that can be utilized. The other issue here is diversification of income sources. The profits from frankincense need to be invested into communities so that they can diversify and have other agricultural outputs or other gums and resin outputs so that they're not just relying on one species or two species without any other economic opportunities.
Dr. Angeleta, for the very research you have shown us, because I come from that part of the country. I'm from Gudmabias, and I'm a member of parliament, and I really know very much all those things you are talking about with regard to the environmental degradation, how the frankincense trees are being really destroyed, and how the whole community is now in despair. And we, myself as a member of parliament from that part, one of the most depressing things that's happening to our economy and to the region, we are very much aware of that. But we seem to have not knowing what to do exactly. Initially, I have been even with the community at some time in the 90s, 1997, 2000, we have established a company which we included all of the community to become shareholders. Every person who is a producer of frankincense, or who even the tappers, who can get $10, we have to we start to pull an economy like that, so that it becomes a company of the community, not the company of some powerful, economically strong person. Those who cannot get $10 can come up with 5 kilos of frankincense and become shareholders. That's the design we did for such a. We did that because we want to make all the community own the company and protect and become part of the system, so that we can tell them not to debark, not to overproduce, to allow them the tree to rest. But unfortunately, that company was not, because we were not having, we sent a shipment to Germany at one point, but the Germans somehow were not happy with the way we were not having the packaging system, the neat system of sending to them. So our next shipment failed to reach Germany because we have no LC, we have no people who can assist us in. We sent about 50 tons of shipment without having any guarantees that our products will that they will send us money. Anyway, that was something has gone. At that time, in the 2001, a kilo of frankincense frankincense criteria was $0.5. $0.5 it was. And we will send it to Germany with $2 a kilo. That's the estimation we got. When new companies came, we thought it was hopeful because the area was economically depressed, and we were very happy that companies came and people would get money, and Frankincense economy will boost, and the community's economy will grow up. But what you have seen is happening, you know. In Goodma Bias, for example, the social aspect of that economy, at that time, or even maybe at 2010, when you were there, the cat trade, somebody used to take from the above the escarpment on his back, a bag of cat. The whole town was using only one bag. Somebody will carry it on his back, not on a car. Nowadays, 4 Land Cruisers arrive at Gudmabias, bringing cat to the economy. All the community, all the young people are chewing now, which means addiction, which means people will not go to work on time, which means as soon as young man raises up, he wants, and the cat arrives, he runs to the mountains in order to get some gum, so that he sells and gets a instead cat. The situation is so dire because the money has arrived into the community when they have no plans what to do with that money. Huge money arrived all of a sudden money arrived, and people had no plans what to do with this money. The only thing they will do now is just to chat. Even their livelihoods economy is not improving. Their health condition is not even getting proper. More money, more poverty, more ill health, more tuberculosis, more. It has become a curse again for us that we have getting so many, getting our kilo of 1 kilo of frankincense for $6. This has become a curse to the community now, really, unfortunately. So the whole thing needs a lot of really, something must be done to build the environment, and some must be done to the communities. A huge. We're thinking of organizing at least an organization that will together with the community, as you were proposing for elders and making an umbrella. But the government institution is extremely important, and we have been thinking of that for lately, so that becomes more intervening, more aggressive, doing something physical at the village. Unless we do that, which is a governmental institution, which works with the community and solves these huge problems, I think this is one of the ways we can approach these things. But thank you very much. Really, we just again, I was trying to forget it, but again, you have made me depressed again. Thank you very much.
I would like to say, I would like to mention a few points for the solution. It's so sad we put profit above the people. It's so sad that we put credits above needs, even the rule of Allah from the rule of the people. It's so sad we use natural as a credit card. We buy for everything because of everything is related for money. We cutting trees of all 50% of trees in the world have been cutting for the last 100 years because of money. And actually, I would like to mention it one thing, that solution belongs to us, not about the government, not about the NGOs, not about even, it depends on each and every person of us have responsible. If we don't save the natural environment, we're not saving us. We're not even, we can't leave it. It's our oxygen, it's everything for us. So I'd like to add it that solution depends on the people, not anything else.
First, my name is Ahmed Bashir Hassan. First, I would like to thank Ms. Anjanita and Mr. Awale with their presentation. Really, it was very, 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 very effective presentations and very technical reports. I think the report is very sympathetic, really. It was very, 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 power information that I get from Snack regions and also in Somaliland Hall. So, I would like to ask you one question. The question is, you share this information with the Ministry of Environment, and And also, could you give us, rule of and the rules and regulations that we're going to manage? That's my question. And my point and my contribution is the that we can control this is making, a shifting of harvesting. For example, the government, especially the ministry, must make, a protected area that must be harvested in, for example, 5 years. The other 5 years are protected area. It means to make a shifting. That's my contribution. But my question is, what's the procedures and the methods that we are going to save these natural resources? It's very important to give us, the rules and regulations. And also we are, for example, proposing the parliament and the government as well to make the rules and regulations to control this. Unless we will be in danger as well. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصومالي بان اسكغا hadlaya hadii alla ka dhigo way fiican tahay runtii fikradaha soo jeedisay wasaaradda waa warbixinta waanu siinay xaaladdu siday tahay runtii iyada mas'uuliyaddii qaranku saaran tahay oo hadii alla ka dhigayo deegaanka iyo ilaalintiisaba kulay waa kala hadalay wixii talaana waanu soo jeedino waa u gudbinay dhanka kale waxa weeye sida geedkan maaha geed dadku wada leeyahay waa geed la kala leeyahay oo ownershipkiisu shakhsiyaad ku kooban yahay marka ilaalintiisu way ka dhib badan tahay dhulka community ee la wada leeyahay inuu sidaa horta yara fahanaa qurux badan waayo waa beerlin leeyahay ma oran kartid way adag tahay sidaa u tiraahdaa geedkaaga xilligaa midho ka gooso waqtigaana ha ka goosanay marka arrintu waxay u baahan tahay daraasad intaa ka sii qoto dheer in runtii loogu kuurgalo sidii wax looga qaban lahaa tusaalahaan haddaynu soo qaadano dadku dee intuuga ku gurataa way jiraan laakiin inta badan cidda geedkan sidaa u isticmaashaa waxa weeye ciddii lahayd ee iyadu sheeganaysay marka wasaaraddu dee waxaan filayaa inaanay awoodu lahayn inaanay dee beerlin leeyahay aanay odhan karin war xilligaana ka guro xilligaana ha gurani well, it's very difficult to control this kind of unsustainable utilization of the resources and we informed the government and the Minister of Environment to control this unsustainable use of frankincense and raisins. Thank you.
So we did present this to the Minister of Environment, and I didn't really have a sense that she felt like she could do anything about it, which made me uncomfortable. And so your point about the people having to rise up about this and put pressure on the government is very well said, because without more pressure, I don't feel confident that the central government has either the resources or has this on the national agenda. We need the parliamentary members from the region to push. We need the governor of Senag to push. We need the academics to push. We need the people to push. We need everybody, the businesses. We need the businesses to push. We need a multi-pronged approach to solve this problem. It will not just come from the top down. It has to come from the bottom up and the top down at the same time. And so we're hoping over the next year to create a very lively campaign around this issue. We're trying to raise more money to do that, and hopefully in January I'll be returning with a documentary crew to do a documentary on this issue so that we can push, and it also needs to come from the international community who buys these products to push for change. Yeah.
As I heard before, you are a sustainable expert. So when we are talking sustainable, we know that it contains different pillars. For example, social pillar, economic pillar, environmental pillar. And thank you very much. You all mentioned that pillars, but there is a one pillar that I don't see your presentation, that you're not still presented, the government. the role of government of this issue? What is exactly the role of government to solve this problem as a sustainable issue? That's one question. The other question is that you know that as generally when the price increases, the supply increases. So you know that in general the world the price of this franchise increased. So do you believe this regulation is caused that external pressure rather than internal pressure? That's the two questions.
There's no doubt that the government has to become involved in outlawing and banning some of these unsustainable practices. How that works in Somali culture is something I'm still learning about, and understanding clan structures and local and national government structures. But absolutely there has to be governance here. Without governance, this is what's going to continue happening, is the overstripping and overharvesting of these trees. There's no regulation. And as the price goes up without any regulation, it will become more of a resource curse. Yeah? Do you want to say anything else on that?
Actually, the government is, you know, the Ministry of Environment and Rural Development is officially mandated sustainable utilization of the resource and conservation as well. Thank you.
I just want to ask you about the awareness and the understanding of the very people who are doing this, about the consequences of this harvesting may put on the environment. So are they informed? Are they aware of the consequences of the nomadic people, the absolute nomadic people? How do they feel?
In the presentation, you know, particularly, you know, the audios, the question is that being asked, you know, they were exactly saying that, you know, I mean, it's the end for them, you know, to lose those trees. But they are in that poverty trap, you know. So, of course, they know the consequences, but actually there are other driving forces, like for example, the cat, addiction, you know, all these kind of things are driving. You add anything?
Just second that, and that there's no other jobs, and that they know as these trees are being lost, especially the elders, that they have no other economic incentives to stay in these communities. There's no other jobs or productivity. So they're quite aware of how dire their situation is. I would say the young folks do not understand that as well. One of the questions that I asked repeatedly was, did people see the trees as part of a forest? And the answer was no. So the understanding of the trees as commodities and as trees is more well understood than understanding the links in the ecosystem. So that's something that I didn't see a high level of awareness about in terms of understanding ecosystem dynamics. But the young folks do not seem to understand what's being lost. They're looking for short-term gain, and they're thinking about today, and that's very normal when people are in a poverty trap and they need to eat. They will exploit resources as fast as they can to feed their children, and it's hard to even blame them for that, right? So they're not the enemy either. They're caught in a cycle that is perpetuating poverty and environmental degradation.
Yes, yes, please.
And Bismillah. And first, Dr. Angelita, thank you for your professional lecture. And marka labaad horta waxaan ku hadlayaa anuu Soomaali. And laba su'aalood baanan qabaa. Labada su'aalood waxa weeye sidaan arkaynay dhirta migraansa ay ma dili karaan dee waxyaabo quradee oo ah economically iyo quradee. Laakiin mayna jirin xanuuno migraansa sida dee microorganisms dee ka qayb qaadan kara inuu geedkan dhinto. Mise economically oo quro dhimanaya isagu. Su'aasha labaad aan weydiinaya waxa weeye sidaan markii ay lecture soo jeedinaysay aan ka arkayay geedkan 50 sano ilaa 6 sano noolaan karaa. marka maxaa miyaan dib geedkii loogu beeri karin si uga badbaado inay meesha ka baxaan
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم geedkani horta markiisa hore waxaa qurux badan dadka malaha in yarunbaa wax ka og haddaan geedka ka yaro warramo geedkani waa geed runtii geed dhirta loo yaqaano geed quwaaxa oo ka baxa dhulka jooggiisu sarreeya ee buuraleyda gobolka Sanaag labada geedba midna wuxuu ka baxaa qaybta hoose ee dhulka midna xagga sare waxay ka dul baxaan dhagxaan waaweyn oo volcanic rock ah runtii marxalad iyo xaalad adag ayay dhirtaasi ku baxaan dhimashadoodana waa tan inantu ka warramaysay marka la eego heerka dhimashadiisa sababta ugu badan ee u dhimanaya waxa weeye dhaawaca ka soo gaadha marka la jafayo oo u nuglaadaa in cayayaankan muxuu ahaayey geedka dila ee xaraha loo yaqaanaa kaasina marka dambe ayuu galaa geedku uu sababaa inuu geedku dhinto waxaa intaa raaca geedkan moxorka ama maydigu labaduba waa sidaa aan sheegno waa geed quwaax geed quwaaxuna wuxuu ka mid yahay dhirta sida degdega u baxda hase yeeshee bii'adda uu geedkani ka baxay oo ah buuraha dhakadooda iyo dhuwaan cidigeli karin oon ciid iyo biyo badan midna aan lahayn ayaa had iyo jeer waxay sababaan inuu geedku caafimaadkiisu noqdo mid daciifa oo aan u adkaysan karin waxyaalo dusha kaga timaada ama dabayl ha noqoto ama wax dadku u geysta ha noqoto laakiin haddii geedka uu helo bii'ad ka duwantu maanta ka baxo oo si wanaagsan loo manage gareeyo runtii geed cimri dheer leh oo wax soo saarkiisuna badanayo ayuu noqon karaa kuley intaasumaan kusoo koobayaa haddii alla ka dhigo
Bismillah. Actually, what was attracted me about the presentation of Dr. De Carlo is you mentioned a few times about abandoning the traditional way of dealing with the trees. What I was asking, I was wondering if it's the case to document the indigenous knowledge on these specific issues, and as far as I know, nothing is documented, or at least less is documented what could have been done. And as we know, people who know about that knowledge are passing away, and what can be done? Collecting publications I know that there are so many students here, and it's the case to offer these students to at least master's degree, working specifically on collecting this information. I think it should be a must. And this is targeted to Ahmed mainly as a lecturer of the University of Hargeisa, but also I see that some people from the ministry, the DG, and so many other people were here a few minutes ago. So I think the message should be, let us document now, because of that's a way that we can save these traditional. Would you want to add something about the?
Besides the cutting, there are natural diseases who have no pieces that happen to trees in the area.
I think there could be natural diseases, but actually, I mean, the cutting or tabbing, over tabbing, or debarking makes the tree vulnerable, more vulnerable, to these, kind of organisms. But naturally, we know hare, even in a living tree, all kinds of tree, it actually attacks, But, the vulnerability will be higher when it's actually, debarked, Coming to the indigenous knowledge, I think I remember there was one Somali writer, Ahmed Artan Hange, I think. Yeah, in one of his books, I think he have actually documented something about the traditional knowledge on cutting and caring and that. But still, I think that's an area which is, need to be further investigation and documentation on this issue is very, very important. Yeah.
The international community, the companies that care about this, are actually looking to my research team to come up with best practices. So I could really use some help and some other students involved. Absolutely. I welcome, I implore you to have other students work with me. Right now we're a central team of 3, and this is too big of a job for us to do alone. I absolutely want more Somali people involved. I do not plan on staying in the front of this issue. I plan to move back as Somalis can then take it from there. Absolutely, we need to put together a compendium of best practices. That has been attempted by some of the multilaterals. It did fail because they didn't necessarily go to elders and interview them in their homes and in their villages on the ground. That was a big mistake. And so we have to be willing to head out to Senag and spend weeks sitting with elders and having them show traditional techniques and definitely catalog those and compare them against some of the already existing documents on traditional knowledge and practices. And not only about the boswellia trees, but the complementary relationships in the forest between other plant species and the boswellia trees. So yes, I need more students. Yeah.
I would like to make an observation related as to what would be the sustainable solutions in terms of addressing the problems which are really market-driven, and we're dealing with private property, as the colleague there said. Given that there is some awareness at the international markets level, perhaps the way forward really is an established area of regulation called co-regulation, whereby industry enforces standards that are agreed with outsiders. And there's a role for government to establish the standards, but the council that you mentioned, for example, in your presentation, could function as a way of policing and enforcing those standards. And sort of a certification could be part of that process, whereby the community themselves self-certify, and with agreed, sort of a standards, different farms are inspected by their own community members as part of the council functions. And buyers are aware of those certifications and value those certifications. So they say a market-based approach to dealing with this sort of problems, which are basically driven by economic demand. That's a perception that I would like to make.
Yeah, and you're right on that. A certification process of a third-party verification of sustainable management of trees is very necessary here, whether that's carried out by government or schemes such as similar to fair trade, right? Fair trade does not, I actually lobbied fair trade several years ago and encouraged them to have fair trade frankincense. But because it's a wild crafted product, it's not grown in domestic settings, it doesn't qualify. So now there is a new UN compact on biological diversity and bioproduct removal of genetic materials from countries all around the world. And it does have mechanisms that we could draw from in terms of certifying sustainably managed trees. It can absolutely be done. We can use drone technologies, the small ones, the little ones you hand fly, to look at trees because it's rugged terrain. We can establish where resins come from, who's harvesting them, what kind of practices they're using by ground truthing. It can absolutely be done. We can also use satellite imagery to overlay, to look at the health of the canopy. So there's lots of things that can be done to certify, so to speak, sustainably harvested frankincense. Yeah? And a lot of that, I do believe, will come from the international community, especially now when I have to start releasing reports that there is no company that can claim that they are sourcing sustainably harvested frankincense. They can't. It just doesn't. I keep asking to see these sites where the trees are well managed, and no one's taken me yet. So I know that I did not cover the entire growing region. So I'm not saying that it does not exist, I will be back. Like I said, the team, we have a whole nother round of ground truthing that we'll be doing in January and working on the documentary. So we have a lot more ground to cover.
I'm real environmentalist. I think this presentation is up to me. My question is about Dr. Angelita. Have you ever checked the series of the land to generate the seeds? My question is like that.
So we have just begun to do that, taking soil samples and rock samples and trying to understand what the trees need and what are the limiting factors for them. That is not well understood here in Somaliland in regards to the endemic species that grow here. So we've started to work on that. Yeah, we've just started to work on that. Again, I could use more students and more cooperation with the universities to do this kind of analysis. There's so much that needs to be done, really, there is. So there's definitely opportunities to get involved and participate in the research.
So first, I would like to thank Dr. Angelita and her team. I'm one of the family members who own the land, Frankincense, especially Rakas area. So I appreciate you have been talking about Rakas. So you saw my brother there, one of my brothers, Abdurrahman, in Rakas and Ergafa as well, I hope. So the solution is, especially our family, we have family experience more than 100 years. My grandfather, who was the first man who exported these frankincense to Yemen. So we have that experience. So we know the problem. We know the solution as well. So the solution is the landowners can make a good decision about this matter. So it is up to them if they want to make a good decision, what is good for them in the near future. So that is I hope, the solution. Forget the government, forget the buyers, forget the middleman, all this. So the problem or the solution lies with the landowners. So we don't want to give up, and I hope in the near future we will make a good decision regarding this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Angelita, for her presentation and research to our country. My question was, as we all are aware of, there is these frankincense are living things. They have diseases, they have competition in the area that they live with other species. They cannot carry up this sort of pressure. You say that there is economic competition going on in the country, and especially the region of Sinag. But there is another problem. There's two-way rising. When the supply of this commodity increase, the capacity carrying of this species decrease or decline. As you will see, those people, those community living there, they used to cut out or to harvest the tree using a metal, special to shave the tree. As everybody knows, the metal usually has a mercury organism living on it, and there's a disease breaking there. My suggestion was, rather than the economic issue, there is a environmental issue, especially there is a diseases which motivate this decline, this death, and it needs to research it furthermore. Thank you.
My name is Umul Khair Mohamed Diri. I study at University of Hargeisa, especially in Department of Environmental Science. And Dr. Angelita Di Carlo, and I'm not asking you a question, but I would like to thank you for your contribution and your motivation and your lecture, also in your field and into our country. And frankincense is one of the highest quality trees in the world, and it's used in many purposes and different cultures in the world. And also, it is our heritage trees in Somaliland, or special species of Somali in our country. And so, and you mentioned many problems, like that tree was faced both environmentally and socially. And lastly, I would like to say that is our responsibility to maintain that tree or that species, and especially Somalilanders. It is not too cringe to maintain and protect that tree, and that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me finally for the question. And also I'm going to thank the doctor who present us a very useful issue regarding with our environment. Now, what I'm going to ask is the final product that goes to EU, US, and China. And as we know, sometimes a society believes something that it can cure some other things. But unless it has done scientifically, that thing will might disappear before it has been proven, that issue. Now, what I want to ask you is, this is finally proven that it can be used for cancer cells, or it is just a theory that suggesting this can be a treatment for that? And if that thing has proven, it's very obvious that this mountain area cannot provide that huge market which can overload this area, and it will disappear within a short time because of that market. So what is the theory behind this oil? Is it scientifically proven, or is it just something goes on? Thank you.
Just about 3 weeks ago, one of the initial findings was released in the medical journals as having a positive impact on killing cancer cells. The trials are showing good results. They are not completely finished. They're ongoing, but the results are coming in already. This is from the medical community, the international medical community. So these are peer-reviewed results and studies that are definitive. So the initial findings that are coming in is that yes, there are components within these oils, over 330 chemical compounds, very complex chemical profile to these oils, and that there are compounds within the oils that have the ability to kill cancer cells up to stage 4. To very, very aggressive forms of cancer. So this is good news and bad news at the same time, because the oils are extremely valuable in medical applications. But as you said, this could create more of a resource curse situation and drive the price up even higher. So I know the Chinese are really looking to get a hold of more oils and more resins as the oncological trials are continuing. So there's some happening in China, some at Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech. There's also trials with melanoma in animals, using it on horses, had very good results. We're able to completely cure tumors, and these are medical professionals, peer-reviewed studies. So they're the highest form of science that we have. So also, I should mention that pharmaceutical companies are working quite diligently to be able to synthesize some of these compounds in the lab because they realize that the primary source might not be here much longer, and that's what Big Pharma does. It's part of their process to take natural compounds and then look to synthesize them in the lab, and that research is underway as well. You can buy frankincense oil in the West that is not really from a tree. We call it synthesized frankincense, but it's usually not as effective. And so There's lots of research going on right now on the medical applications for frankincense oils, for Carteri and Feriana, both.
Thank you, your presentation. And I am one of the in Ministry of Environment, and I worked with this and Bisuelia and Camifora, and also we have 6 species in here in Somaliland for gummies and raisins. It is 2 for Bisuelia, Carteri, and Ferrarina in Senag, while Camifora 2 species, Chudati and Hadi, is in also in Senag and other parts of the country, and 2 acacia type of gummies. Also we have acacia Senegal, Arabic gum. Also, although we are not producing, but we have these trees, and also we have acacia sail, what we call it in Somali, wadi. And also we saw when I used to work in this field, we saw that the problem is the people are making this nowadays villages on the sites of where the plants were growing near, and then this problem was duplicated the problem, these villages, and also this cat is another problem, as well as where the position of the trees are very large place that cannot control the ministry, because it is from El Ayo in east, from Sahel in west. It's large area and remote area. So we cannot, these days we cannot afford to control all this area. And even the owners of these trees are rented. While they rented, some who were rented, they were of a tabbing. When they offer tabbing or the barking at the night time, the trees were dying. And another problem is when they generate another young trees, there was goats that can cut the young shootlet. Because previous times, the area of this cross were remote, far from the animal and far from the people, except the tabbing people. And that's another increasing the problem. And propagation. The propagation, we saw the Carteri can propagate, but we cannot propagate the Bisuelia Ferrarina. Carteri, 1 tree grows in Ergafo, and 1 tree grows by propagation and grows in Las Idli. But both trees, when they come from their niche and they transfer to another environment, they cannot produce as it was when they were in their climate. But Camifera can propagate easily, and also Camifera has not variable. It's variable as Suelia. Thank you very much.
Okay, the presentation you made was shocking to me. Although I came from that particular region, I didn't realize the magnitude of the problem. And I think one of the things we have to do is to have some sort of awareness in the political sphere of the country. I think the political leaders of the country are not aware of the magnitude of the problem and not taking into consideration in their political platforms. I know that it is a commercial good but it's also issue of identity and culture and history for us, and the two should be balanced. Therefore, by experience, I know our institutions are unable and unwilling to intervene in things like that. Therefore, the regulation of this country is not in near future closer to take any action in order to have a sustainable harvesting. Therefore, can we advocate for total ban or abolishment of export of cereals out of the country, and then urge the government to have alternative economic income for the people who are there? Otherwise, I think we will be able to speak and do a lot of things, and at the end of the day, Frankincense will be history that Somaliland when it's had. Thank you very much.
The government alone cannot tackle such problem, so that it requires, to establish strong linkage among the, government, civil society, international institutions, and private companies. After that, the government can, can do something. The other important thing is, as you know, this kind of boswellia trees is privately owned, not the communal trees. So that it's very difficult. Markasta, it's very difficult to control, unsustainable harvesting of this tree, because it's privately owned. And so that I'm suggesting, to undertake a further, investigation and research on, regarding, the usuries. It's, the usuries and the landowners are too different. Some of the landowners, they rent their lands to, to youth or, somebody else. After that, the one who rented the trees can immediately, harvest the trees unsustainably. The whole year round, they cut until the trees dying. We cannot say that. Nobody can say that. Nobody can say that. It's a national asset. Actually, it requires, further research.